Hello and welcome to day 40 of my Sea-to-Sea biking adventure. Today is the summing up video, the final video of my grand adventure, and we're going to go over some statistics of the ride, some details about how I did the ride, the equipment I used, the cameras I used, YouTube, that sort of thing, and also answer questions. So I've got a lot of questions that have been submitted on Facebook and on YouTube and on Instagram, and so we'll go over those today as we talk about the Dr. Dale's Sea-to-Sea bike adventure. Let's do it. Okay, I'm going to jump in here before this really gets started to tell you that this is a long video. There were lots of things to talk about, lots of questions that I wanted to answer, and I tried to fool you by wearing the same shirt every day, but this was filmed over multiple days, and as you go along, you're going to see that the lighting conditions change constantly, so I realize I'm not fooling anybody. But I want to tell you that down in the description of this video, there's a table of contents or a listing of chapters, different topics, different questions, so if you want to, you can jump to a particular question you want to see the answer to, or you're welcome to watch it from start to finish. I appreciate you being here, and let's get started. Okay, so first thing, let's talk about some statistics. Okay, how long was the trip? Well, it was 64 days away from home. I left Marietta, Georgia on August the 19th, and I got back on October 21st. The longest ride I had on the trip was day 36. That was 101 miles. That was in Ohio. The shortest ride was day 32. I didn't even measure it, actually, but I know it couldn't have been more than a couple of miles. But that was the one in Abilene, Kansas, where I was just riding around the Eisenhower Historic Complex there. What was the hardest day on the bike? That would have been day 13. In California, from Garberville to Ukiah. It was it was a long day, 92 miles. That was not the longest day, but it also was the day that had the most climbing of the entire trip. 4,850 miles of climbing, which is a lot. Yeah, that was also the longest day I did on the bike. I was pedaling that day for 8 hours and 24 minutes. The highest point that I reached anywhere in the country on the bike was day 29 in Boreas. That was Boreas Pass, Colorado, outside of Breckenridge. I got to 11,475 feet. The second highest day was the day after that when I climbed to Vail Pass. That was 10,674 feet in elevation. But the third highest day was day 20, and that was in Bryce Canyon, Utah. Went to, I think Inspiration Point is what it's called, and that was at 9,100 feet of elevation. So total wise, I did 38 days on the bicycle in some form or fashion. I covered 1,917 miles on the bike. I had an elevation gain, total feet climbed, okay, on the bike of 71,659 feet. That translates into 13 and a half vertical miles of climbing. That is about 2.5 times up Mount Everest. That's how high I climbed on the bike. Okay, but that was not the only part of the Sea-to-Sea bike adventure, just on the bike. So what about in the car? Okay, well, there were three parts to that, to answer that question. On August the 19th, I rented a car here in Marietta, Georgia. I put the bike in the car and I drove to Seattle, Washington, okay, to start the trip. That was 2,789 miles, okay. After day 17, I think, I rented a car in Santa Rosa, California, and I drove to Tahoe City up at Lake Tahoe. That was just after hard days and after my days of the flat tire, and I was just worn out. And I decided to skip a few days. It was a heat wave in the Sacramento Valley, and I just didn't want to ride. I was too worn out. So that I did 239 miles in that car. Turned that car in and thought that would be it, that I would ride the rest of the way. That turned out to not be true, as you know. And then in Fallon, Nevada, after day 17, I rented a car and I kept that car with me then for the rest of the trip, all winding across the United States all the way to Marietta, Georgia. And on that car, I did 6,204 miles. Okay, so the driving portion of my grand adventure was 9,232 miles. Okay, so the total miles of Dr. Dale's Sea-to-Sea bike adventure, I had it's on the little blurb that it says it's 5,000 miles. The total miles that I did was 1,917 on the bike, 9,232 in the car, for 11,149 miles. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot of miles. So that's the statistics for the trip. And now let's get to some questions. All right, let's talk about the bike that I used on my Sea-to-Sea cycling adventure. And here it is, the Giant Revolt Advanced Pro 1 bike in Misty Forest color, which was sold only as a frame for you to build up the bike. I did not particularly want to do that, but by the time I decided to buy a gravel bike last spring, there were no large Giant Revolts for sale anywhere in America. But the bike shop in Bethesda, Maryland had this frame. They also had a Giant Revolt that they had built up, but then it turned out it had a crack in its frame, and so they took all the gear off of that standard frame and they built up this bike on the frame that they had, and it has worked beautifully. It is pretty much the standard Giant Defy Advanced Pro 1 model, with the exception that I added these Profile Designs aero bars on there. Not so much to give me more speed, but just to give me a different place to rest my hands, because hand numbness has been an issue for me on long rides. Speaking of that, the other non-standard part of this bike is I did switch out the handlebars. So the large frame comes with a 460 millimeter wide handlebars, and we switched these out to the 420 millimeter handlebars, which are the ones that come on a small size frame. But what that allowed me to do then with the other handlebars, my hands and wrists were always flexed out like this, which led to numbness. With the narrower handlebars, I could basically grip the frame with my hands in a neutral position, and that solved my hand numbness problem. So I was very, very happy with that. It's the seat that came on the bike. Did add the fenders. These are the Speed Rocker fenders that I bought at REI, and these are the tires that replaced the tires that came with the bike. Those were Giant Cadex tires that I had to blow out on in Ukiah, California. Wasn't the tire's fault. I pushed them a little too far. But these were the Goodyear connector gravel tires that did very well the rest of the trip. They are not the fastest tires in the world. They're a little bit heavy. The rolling resistance is a little bit not as good as some, but again, they got me home. I had no more trouble with my tires, no more blowouts, and so I have nothing but good things to say about them. So that's the bike that carried me across the country, and I carried it across the country. So yeah, it did very well. I just did weigh the bike, and as it is, with the aero bars on there and with the fenders on it, it weighs about 24 pounds. So not as light as a road bike. For instance, my road bike is the Giant Defy, which is very similar in geometry to the Revolt, but not quite as robust. I used that for a lot of adventures, but it was getting a little bit beat up from what I was asking it to do, and especially to carry all that I was going to carry on this trip, I felt much better with the bike built with that in mind, with a little bit more robust frame. So there you go, the Giant Revolt Advanced Pro 1. Okay. How did I carry everything on the bike? I've got filmed a video about that, and so I'll put that in here if I haven't already shown you that. But okay, let's go over what I carried on my trip. I can't believe that I got all this stuff back out after a week being home, but yeah, it'll be a good reminder if I ever do this again of how I had things packed. So yeah, let's start, which would be at the rear of the bike with the rack bag. Goes on the top of the rack back there. I had in the bottom of that a small backpack for days that I thought I was going to go grocery shopping or need to carry extra water or something, just to have some extra capacity. I used it a few times. I have one pair of short pants, one pair of long pants, puffy vest, 2 shirts with collars, 2 long sleeve t-shirts, 2 short sleeve t-shirts, my trusty Tilly hat, shaving kit with meds and all that sort of stuff, and a bag full of electrical cables and charging blocks and all the things I would need to plug in each night and recharge all my lights and batteries and that sort of thing. That all went in this bag that went on top of the frame. Then moving along to the rear pannier. On one side I had, so that's all clothes up there that I would wear off the bike. So I tried to keep that organized as separate from bike stuff. This is mostly bad weather stuff. So I have a raincoat, my long sleeve cycling jacket, my short sleeve cycling vest, a hat with a bigger brim if it starts raining, bib shorts with long legs that I only wear when it is cold, rain pants, Gore rain pants that come in handy if it's raining, and my puffy jacket. And I've got to tell you, my puffy jacket went anywhere I could stuff it, but it's on the list that it went in the left rear pannier. So in the right rear pannier, then, I had my laptop. If I was going to do YouTube videos, I needed a laptop, so I did carry my laptop all the way across the country. Then I had cycling gear, so I have wool socks for cold weather. All this was in this small case right there. So it had wool socks, balaclava, arm warmers, leg warmers, long finger gloves, a hat cover if it was raining, shoe covers if it was cold, and a little bivy bag that would open up. All that went in that small little packing cube. I had a Ziploc bag with whatever bike outfit I was not wearing on that day. So we've got a pair of bib shorts, a jersey, socks, arm warmers. Those would all be in a big Ziploc bag. Then in this small packing cube, I had a spare pair of gloves, a neck warmer gaiter, spare arm sleeves, spare cycling socks, and a small Ziploc bag with chamois cream and sunscreen that I used every day. Okay, that's the rear of the bike. Then on the front side, front panniers, in one I had a bag that had my spare lube for my chain and a dirty oily rag that I could use on the bike. I had spare sunglasses, I had spare reading glasses, I had a small packing cube that had my underwear and socks. I had 2 pair of short socks, 2 pair of long socks, again to go off the bike. I had then on the other front pannier my shoes. When you have big feet, carrying shoes is a problem because your shoes are big, and so that pannier was just for my shoes. I also had a emergency bivy sack that I luckily never had to use, and a medical kit that I did have to use once when I had a cut on my finger. And then the frame bag, okay, had all the bike repair gear. So I have a spare tube, I have an air pump, I have a spare chain links, I have tube plugs, I have duct tape, I have electrical tape, I have an air pressure gauge, I have some Allen wrenches, I have some tie downs, okay, zip ties, a tire tool there to take off the front tire, and some handy wipes. All that goes in the frame bag with anything else that I can think of that I might need on the bike to repair it. And the other 2 bags on the bike then were a top tube bag, and that one would have snacks in it, or I'd carry my battery and a cable to recharge the camera in case it needed charging during the day. This bag also would carry snacks and a towel and that sort of thing. And so I don't have all the snacks bought up now because I don't need them. So, but that's what would have been in that bag. So believe it or not, all of that went with me on the bike all the way across the country, and it went in those bags: the rack bag, the rear panniers, the front panniers, frame bag, top tube bag, and the handlebar bag right there. I also had one of the small handlebar bags that you can put a bottle in, and that's pretty handy too for carrying an extra drink. So that's it. Now let's see if it goes all in the bags. I think it will. Let's do it. 'There you go. Everything in a bag, ready to go on the bike. 41 pounds of gear. That's a lot. That is a lot. 278 and a half. All right. No wonder I was tired. Okay, how did I first get into bike touring like this? Okay, biking, I had a bike as a kid. I've always had a bicycle of some kind. But I was not a serious cyclist really until about 8 years ago. Okay, I've told this story before many times, but the only thing I ever did was go to a bike trail that's here in Atlanta, the Silver Comet Trail, a rail trail, and I would ride that, and it was great. It's a great resource to have, but you do it enough times, you get tired of it. It's kind of boring. My wife brought home a brochure for a benefit ride to benefit the American Diabetes Association. It's called the Tour de Cure. My father was type 1 diabetic. He died at 49 from complications from being a type 1 juvenile diabetic. And my youngest son is type 1 diabetic. So this ride, my brochure, my wife wrote home, and she said, you know, you like to ride your bicycle, and this is for a cause that you care about, so why don't you sign up for it? And so I did. And it was the first ride like that I'd ever done, first time I'd ever tried to raise any money. Or was asked to raise money, and I was embarrassed to do it, and I didn't want to do that, and I just told her, I said, I'm not going to ask anybody to give any money to this, I'll just write a check. I think it was $200 you had to raise. And she said, well, that's fine, but you're underestimating your friends. And so, okay, so I put it on Facebook. This is what I want to do, need to raise that money. 12 hours go by, we've raised the money. The Diabetes Association immediately sent me an email saying, you need to raise your goal. You need to raise more money than that. So I said, okay. So I've raised it to $400. 24 hours later, we raised that much money. They said, you need to raise your goal again. And so I'm just embarrassed. I raised it to $1,000. And I said, that's it. I'm not going to keep going like that. And we ended up raising over $1,500 for that. I was just amazed that people would do that and was so grateful. And then I had to do the ride, and so I had signed up for the 100-mile ride. And I had never come close to riding 100 miles on a bicycle, and I did it, and it almost killed me, but I did it. And I was pretty proud of myself. I was proud of the money we raised, and that was all great. But if you've ever done something like that, another year goes by and they remember you and they want you to do it again. And I thought, well, how am I going to, I can't, last year, the whole point of me, all my promotion for this thing was, can I ride 100 miles? And now everybody knows I can, so why would they give money again? So I said, okay, well, then I got to up it. So I signed up for two. So I did two of those. I did one in South Carolina and one in the Atlanta ride, and tried to raise money again. And we raised a bunch of money again. And in the meantime, I noticed that these rides that were out on the roads were not on a bike trail anywhere, but they were out in the country, and there were people there to help you, and there were people there to block intersections and give you food and water at the rest stops, and it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that. And so I started finding other rides like that to do and signing up for them, and just enjoying it. And so I did several that year, and I started kind of going, looking for them and going to places to ride. And the next year came along, and I think I did three of those the next year. I know I did four another year. I did two on back-to-back days to see, that was my hook. Can I do 100 miles on Saturday and another 100 miles on Sunday? And so those type of rides then were all over the country, and I started signing up for them. And I was not saying I'm going to ride all across the country, but I was keeping the list of where I have ridden and, checking them off. And as time went on, I just had more and more of those. COVID cut into that, and there's not many of those Tour de Cure benefit rides for diabetes anymore. A few, but not. I don't think Georgia does one anymore. And a lot of those rides went away. But by then, I had ridden in 25 states or something like that. So it was becoming a little more serious. My friend Les Cohen invited me to go to Montana about 6 years ago with him to ride there, because he had done it the year before. We've done that for 6 straight years and ridden around in Montana. And so going there and coming back, sometimes I would do another state, like I did North Dakota on the way back, and South Dakota and Minnesota. So I was just slowly keeping these states. We went on a vacation to Maine. I didn't take the bike, but I rented a bike and rode up there. And so the list was growing. And until finally I got to the point where I was at the start of this year, where I had ridden in 39 states, and thought, okay, you need to finish this before you get any older. We had a cruise to Alaska. So in Alaska, I rented a bike one day. So that checked off Alaska. So there I was at 40, needing 10 more to go. And that's what this trip was all about, was to get those final 10. So I sort of fell into it, but I just enjoyed it. So that's how I got into these kinds of rides. How long did it take to plan the trip? That trip was several years in the making. I had been thinking about that trip for a long time. As the number of states I added to my list that I had ridden my bike in kept growing, I spent more and more time thinking about how am I going to get those states on the West Coast. They were too far away for just a weekend trip. Every place before that had been basically a trip I could go from home and come back. But that made no sense to think about driving to Oregon and doing a bike ride and then driving back home, or driving to Arizona and doing a bike ride and coming back home. If I was going to go out there, I needed to get more than one state for sure. And so, but it took a long time for me to figure out how I'm going to get that. And the longer I looked at it, the more I just thought this is going to be a big trip, a big adventure to get those states. It came down to two options. One was to put my bike rack on the car, put the bike on the car, and drive to each state. So drive to Colorado, do a bike ride or two in Colorado, pack the bike back up, drive to New Mexico, ride in New Mexico for a little bit, pack the car back up, drive to Arizona. There's nothing wrong with that. And in the back of my mind, that's how I thought that's what I thought I would end up doing. Okay. But just for a mental exercise, I thought, well, what if though I did it on the bike? okay, somehow just to make it a bike trip and not taking the car with me, okay? Because the thing about having the car with you is every ride has to come back to the same place, okay? And that's fine, but out there, I wanted to ride long ways, particularly the coastline. So I thought, well, what if I did it that way? What do I do? Well, I'd start in Washington because that's the furthest away. So might as well start in Seattle. Then I'd come down to Oregon. Well, I knew I wanted to do the coastline of Oregon. Particularly, the coast didn't work with taking a car because if you can only go 30 or 40 miles and you have to come back, for one thing, it's only going to be scenic half of that because you're going to be on the side with the ocean in one direction, and coming back you're going to be on the other side of the road, and that's not even going to be scenic. And so I didn't like that. But I knew I wanted to do the coast of Oregon and then the coast into California, and that's when I did not even know where the Redwood National Forest is. When I saw that as soon as I hit California, I would be in the Redwood National Forest, I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to come down the coast of Oregon, I want to come down the coast of California, and I want to see redwoods. And from that point on, I was leaning then toward this is going to be a bike trip. And so, but it's not just across the country because I needed to hit these states that I had never ridden in before. And so it's got all twisty and kinky because that's Washington, Oregon, and California. But then I need all the four corner states. Okay. And so there's going to be some twisting and turning to get all of those states. And so then I worked that out. And then there was no particular reason that Ohio and West Virginia were left out. I just had not yet gone there to do a bike ride. And in my head, I thought, well, that's still going to be separate because they're up there north of here. But when I looked at what I would do to end up, I would finish the West in Colorado and then head east. I did not really particularly have to turn north. I just had to keep going east and through Kansas and then Missouri, and just keep going east, barely turn north, and I would go to Ohio and I would go to West Virginia before I then had to turn south to come home. So yeah, it just became then, well, let's just get all the states I need in one giant bike ride, and that's then what I spent a lot of time planning. I got serious about the planning earlier this year, 2024, in the spring. January, February, March, a lot of time spent then planning on how this trip would take place. So the next decision is, what are you going to do on the trip? If you're going to do that, are you going to camp or you're not going to camp? I'm not a camper, okay? I didn't particularly want to be sleeping on the ground. That would involve carrying even more things on the bike, which makes the bike heavier, which meant I couldn't go as far every day, which would make the trip even longer. So I knew I was not going to be camping. So I was going to stay at hotels. That's a fine decision. But then in the details come down to, okay, then where are you going to ride every day? That's going to be between about 60 and 100 miles. And there's a hotel at the start and there's a hotel at the end. What about dinner at the end of the ride? And ideally, there'd be a restaurant or more than one at the end near the hotel. So I could get out and I could shower, I could clean up, and I could just walk to a restaurant. Wouldn't have a car to drive to another place. I didn't want to get back on the bike that day. So that's what I would start looking for. So I used a couple of apps, one called Ride with GPS, which is helps you find cycling routes. But primarily I use Komoot, K-O-M-O-O-T. That one seemed to put me on better roads for cycling. But I used them both, and I figured out then, okay, where can I go that day? Each day. I worked it out then. How would I go all the way across this route? From 60 to 100 miles every day, I'm going to end up with a hotel. After that, then I went back to Google Maps, okay, because then you can look at the roads. If you know, you can zoom in on Google Maps and look at a road and to see, what does that road look like? Is it a safe looking road? Does it have a shoulder? Is it a low traffic road that I can ride on? And also then where can I find some rest stops? Where can I fill my water bottles? Are there convenience stores or are there gas stations along the way? Where can I get some lunch? And so I started planning this, and each day then I made a big book, a computerized book, okay, electronic book, an e-book though, but each day then was a day on the route, okay, of where I was going to go, where I was going to finish, where I could get a snack, where I could fill up my water bottles, interesting things that I might see, and where they would be on the ride, and had that all worked out. So that's a lot of planning. It takes a lot of planning. It obsesses you. It becomes part of your life of doing that. So I ended up with this pretty detailed route guide that I followed exactly, okay, up until I didn't, okay. When I rented the car and changed everything, that went out the window, okay. And so that I had to scramble then for deciding then, because I had a car, I could go anywhere. I didn't have to stay with that route that I had picked. And that was great because I had to bypass a lot of things that were too far off of the main goal to go see. And so all of that I saw in Utah, almost everything in Utah I saw was not on the original route. So that was great. But I did not have months to plan it, and I did not have months to detail every ride to see where am I going to go, where am I going to get some water. And so that added a little bit of stress. And it also explains then why on day 28, for instance, I was riding out of Los Alamos and going down the route I had picked out for that day and found that Bandelier National Monument right there on the route. I had no idea that I was even going to see it. I couldn't pass it up. I did ride out there and see it. It was great, but I was shocked that it was on my ride. So yeah, I was much more comfortable when I had it all detailed out of where I was going to go every day, but it added some excitement to the rest of the ride. All right. Another question. Somebody asked, how many flat tires did I have? Believe it or not, only the one flat tire. They're just outside of Ukiah, California. Luckily, only a couple of miles into that day's ride, because that was a big moment in the ride. I'm riding tubeless tires, which have tube sealant inside, and if you get a small puncture in the tire, the sealant then seals it up, and you don't get the flat tire. But there's always a possibility, and so you have ways to fix the tire. When I had that flat, that was a big moment because I tried and I could not fix it. Turns out the tire was it had gone too long. I'd had about 2,000 miles on that tire. That's a lot. Especially carrying all that weight, and it was just worn out, and I could not get it to hold air again. And so that shook me up, the fact that I could not fix that, because I had days coming up where I knew I was going to be in much more remote areas than I was that day. But that day I was able to push that bicycle back at least a couple of miles. I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 miles. Back to a bike shop, and they fixed me up and got me back on the road. But yeah, that was a big moment in the bike ride. But only one time, only one flat did I have, so that was really good. All right, here's another good question. Did I get lonely? No. I was alone, okay, but I did not get lonely. That's a good question though, because before I started on these bike tour trips, that was a question that I had. Would I get lonely? Would I enjoy being out there by myself with nobody to talk to? I was concerned about that. Would I get lonely? Would I get depressed? Be a long ways from home to regret the decisions you'd made. And so back in March of 2022, I looked it up today. When I was still mulling this in my head, I had made a beginning sheet of, okay, how are you going to get those states? That was one of the questions I wrote down was, would I enjoy doing a ride like this? Would I be lonely? That was a very good question. Would I go crazy? Seems kind of dumb, but social media. Okay, before it was always Facebook. But I spend those days taking photos, trying to find anything silly I can take a picture of, anything interesting I can take a picture of. And then I'm thinking about, well, what kind of caption am I going to put? Or I would take a video and I would talk in the video, but always I was talking to you. I was talking to the people that are going to be watching it, okay, or reading about it on Facebook or looking at the photos. And as crazy as it sounds, it doesn't feel like I'm alone out there. It feels like y'all are going with me. So thank you for following along. Thanks for being with me on these rides. I did not feel alone because, I felt like I had people going along with me. Okay, crazy as that seems, I know I would have said that's crazy a few years ago, but that's the truth. So no, never felt lonely. Alone, but not lonely. Okay. Here's the next question. Did I get scared? I don't think I ever really, you would say I was scared. There were some places that I got into some situations where I was at least concerned. Okay. Riding down the coast, the West Coast, US 101, a lot of cyclists do that. Okay. Everything I had looked at showed that a lot of people do that on their bicycles. So in my head, that was going to be a ride that's good for bicycles. Okay. And most of it is, but not all of it. And every day you'd be riding along, have a nice shoulder, feel completely at ease. Okay. Always with cars and trucks, but with a shoulder, you feel okay over there because people are used to there being cyclists out there. And then every day there would be places where the road would narrow, maybe going through those redwood sections, okay? And the shoulder would just disappear. Same number of cars, same number of trucks, logging trucks, they're all still out there, and now that we're all on a road with no shoulder. And you have, as a cyclist, you have no choice. You've got to be in the lane then, and that is not fun, okay? It's not fun when you're driving a car and there's a cyclist up there that's slowing you down, and I know that, and I prefer not to be on that bicycle, but there were times every day on US 101 where that was a situation, and that was not fun. And the worst part was that was often on an uphill section. Okay, down where it's flat along the beach, there's plenty of room. I know that's why it was built that way. So there's plenty of room. They had room. They built a shoulder if they could. Then when they went up into the hills and around the trees and stuff, they just originally had no need, and so they didn't make the roads that wide. And they're not going to cut down any redwoods to widen the roads now. And I understand that, but it was, those areas were places that were not any fun, and I did not like that. So I didn't want to be in the lane any more than those cars wanted me in their lane, but sometimes I had no choice. Okay. That being said, as far as I know, okay, I never had a close call with being hit by a car or a truck. Okay. Now you can define a close call as how close were the cars to you. Sometimes they were close, okay, because you're riding along the road and they're passing you. But never had one where I thought, oh my gosh, I almost just got hit. So I'm thankful for that. All right, this question has come up almost every time I've done one of these and asked for questions, or people will just ask me, did I carry a gun? Okay. No, I do not carry a gun on the bicycle. I don't have a gun. I'm always surprised by how often that is asked, but it is asked, okay? In my mind, the chances of somebody getting shot are pretty high if I was carrying a gun, and that person would probably be me, shooting myself in the foot or the leg, okay, or something worse, okay? And so I try to just avoid a situation where I think I might need a gun, okay? I will admit that all the questions for this trip, then they got me to thinking about that, and so I bought a small thing of pepper spray that I did carry with me on this trip for protection. And day one, I thought, where am I going to carry this pepper spray? And I had no place to carry it. I ended up putting it in one of those bags that had a zipper on it. If I had ever needed that pepper spray, I would have never gotten it. I would have never found it in time to use it. But I did have pepper spray with me on this trip, so there's that. Okay, but no, I did not carry a gun. How do I physically prepare for my rides? Well, I have a stationary bike in the garage that's on what's called a smart trainer that I use, and I ride on Zwift. You've probably seen commercials on TVs about riding Zwift, which is just a virtual world. It makes it not boring to sit in there in the garage and ride all the day. So I do a lot of that. Any day that's too hot or too cold or too rainy, I can just ride in the garage. In addition to going out and riding in the real world. Most of the time, my goal is to ride 100 miles a week, either in the garage, on the trainer, or out on the roads, 100 miles, which is a pretty good goal. Most of the time, I keep that. Not always. Vacations, of course, mess that up, but I try. That's my goal. When I have something big coming up, like this year, start of this year, I upped that to 150 miles a week, and I pretty much kept that as I was training leading up to this summer. I had a big couple of weeks in Montana in June with my buddy Dr. Les. We did that. Then, though, our cruise to Alaska was in July. So I'm not saying this is the great way to train, but 2 weeks on a cruise, eating buffets and, dessert with every meal. That was about 3 weeks before I started this ride. So, yeah, that's what I did. I don't think that's the best way to train for it, but that is how I trained for this one. So, all right, next question. How do I prepare mentally for these rides? Well, I worry and I plan and I fret and I plan and I worry some more and I talk about nothing else to the people around me. So they're sick of it, hearing about it before the trips even begin. So they're probably relieved when it finally starts and I'm out of the house. But I do a lot of planning for this. I try to anticipate problems, what might come off. I try to head them off, and it works pretty well. But unexpected things are always going to happen. And plans go out the window when you get out on the road. All right, next question. What were my favorite places to ride? Well, the Oregon coast is fantastic. Redwood National Forest, awesome. Honestly, everywhere in Utah was just fabulous. From Canyonlands to Bryce Canyon, the town of Kanab, Zion National Park, the Grand Canyon, Santa Fe, Los Alamos, New Mexico, Vail Pass, Steamboat Springs in Colorado, the big bridges in Missouri, Cleveland, of all places, and the Greenbrier River Trail in West Virginia. Those were all awesome. But narrow it down. What was my favorite day? Well, it was hard to beat that day, my first day seeing the redwood trees in California, but for greatness from morning to night, I would have to say the Grand Canyon. I'd seen the Grand Canyon before, but I had never ridden my bike there. Riding along that road along the rim was just fantastic. And then sundown, hiking along the South Rim with Haley and Milo being there with me. I had told Haley that I just wanted to go sit there. I just wanted to have a moment or two to just sit and take in all the beauty of the Grand Canyon. And so that's kind of what we did. We just took our time and walked along. It was great. And then we filmed an ending to that day's video. The sun was going down. Everything was ending up. And then it just kept getting better. Okay. We walked along and suddenly we had bighorn sheep right there all around us along the trail. Milo looking at them looking at Milo, having a stare down. It was just fabulous. And then on the drive back to the hotel that night, it was dark and we just pulled off the side of the road, cut off the lights and went out to look at the stars. And for the first time in my life, I could see the Milky Way with just my eyes, looking up to see the Milky Way. It's fabulous. What a great day. I don't know of any day that had more fabulous sights and events and things happened than that day in the Grand Canyon. And having my daughter there and her having Milo there, it was just great. So I'd say that was my best day. My least favorite place to ride. That's actually pretty easy to answer too. I did not put anything about this on YouTube or on Facebook, but day 3, I turned on this road off of the highway onto this windy, twisty road, and I thought, well, this would be good. The highway hadn't been bad, but this will be a twisty road and I'll just be away from the traffic. I had no idea. I don't know why, but it's a very twisty, windy, uphill road. It's called Northwest Cornelius Pass Road, somewhere north of Portland. It must be a cut through for people because it was full of cars and absolutely full of construction trucks and big dump trucks, and the road just narrowed down to nothing. There was no shoulder at all. I had no choice but to be in the road. It was steeply uphill, twisting where you couldn't see around the curves, and I was holding up traffic, and a lot of traffic, and I felt terrible, but I could not get out of the road. There was no place for me to get even out of the road to let cars go by me. It was terrible. One lady I'll never forget, only person across the country who spoke to me like this, but she was a passenger in a pickup truck. She rolled down her window as they were going by me, and she said, "Are you out of your mind?" And I was working too hard to even respond to that, but I was wondering that same thing myself. Okay, I could not get out of the way. It was terrible. It was only about 3 miles, but it was so steep that it seemed like if you'd asked me at the time, I'd have said it's 10 miles long. Yeah, only time that happened across the entire country, but I'll never forget the sound of her voice asking me if I was crazy. But that was really the only unpleasant encounter I had the entire trip. Overall, people were very nice and kind everywhere I went. All right, here's a good question. Could I have finished the original plan? The original plan was for me to ride my bicycle across the country. It was going to take 68 days on the bicycle. I had 12 rest days planned, so it was going to be 80 days or almost 3 months to finish it. Could I have kept going and finished that ride that way? The answer, I think, is yes and no. Yes, I could have done it. There was no one day that I couldn't handle on that ride. But I could not have kept to the schedule that I had planned. It was too much. I was going to need to take a lot more days off. Like I needed to take multiple days off in a row to really regain my strength, to get over being dehydrated. And I still had 4 days to cross Nevada, in the desert of Nevada. Then I was going to Arizona and going to be in the desert. Then I was going to be in New Mexico and going to be in the desert. So no, I could not have kept up the schedule that I, sitting here in this room, thought that I would be able to maintain. And the fact that already it was going to take almost 3 months. So to think of slowing it down and taking multiple days off, I just didn't want to do it. I just didn't want to take 4 months to do it. No, I wasn't going to do that. So I changed the plan. Okay. 2 days into Nevada, I said, this is it. Okay. I knew I could rent a car in Fallon. I knew if I went another day, I would not be anywhere near I could rent a car for probably another week. And so I pulled the trigger and said, let's change things up. And I don't regret that one bit. Doing it the way I ultimately did it was kind of the best of both worlds, because I could take the car and go to any place I wanted. in those states, including and pick the best places that I wanted to ride. And I didn't have to ride what I call the drudgery miles between the beautiful places. And yes, so no, I would not change that at all. In fact, like I say, it's the best of both worlds because I had wanted to be on the bike without the bothersome idea of having to go back to the car every day as I came down the coast. I just wanted to go down the coast and not stop. And so I did that. And after that, there was no one long stretch that I really wanted to ride without stopping. And so having the car was not a problem at all, doing that the rest of the way. So yeah, it was great. This is a great question. What state had the best locals, the best people that I met? And honestly, I'm not trying to cop out on this, but there's nice people everywhere. Everywhere you go, nice, friendly people. There were plenty of days when I didn't really meet that many people except the people that I checked in and out of the hotels with, and maybe people at some convenience stores when I would stop to get some water and some snacks. But no matter, people were very nice. Okay, especially when you consider that here comes this old guy and he's wearing a latex that does not flatter you unless you really have a nice body. I got shoes on that are clickety clacky. You know, everybody knows where I am. But almost everybody then would ask, you know, how far are you riding today? Where'd you start today? And I would tell them, and no matter what, they were always impressed. Okay, it didn't matter if I had come 10 miles or 50 miles. Okay, and then if I told them, well, since you were interested, I started 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, or 6 weeks ago in Seattle, then they were really amazed. Okay, but they were always very encouraging, and almost everybody said goodbye and have safe travels or be careful out there and good luck. So yeah, there's good people everywhere. Did I pack enough? I think I packed pretty sensibly. I should have taken one more pair of gym shorts. I took one pair of long pants, one pair of short pants. That was fine. Okay. Until laundry day came up. And then I wasn't thinking that somehow you've got to go from your room to wherever the washing machines are. And you really need to be wearing pants when you do that. And so I could only wash the long pants or I could wash the short pants. I had to keep one out to wear to go back and forth to the washing machine. So that was a mistake to not carry a silly pair of gym shorts. All right. Did I pack too much? Okay, probably packed too much. But the biggest items that I could have left at home and made a big difference were my laptop, which I lugged this thing all the way across the country, but I needed that to do the YouTube videos, and I'm glad I did the YouTube videos. And the other was taking a real pair of shoes. Last year in New England, I got these shoes to take just on that trip. They are the lightest weight thing you can imagine. They're barely a sole with just the flimsiest top that you could call a shoe. And they work fine most of the time. But one day then I had to walk a couple of miles into town and I had blisters all over my feet. Okay, they're just had zero support in those shoes, and I could not imagine having only those shoes for 2 or 3 months. So I wanted some real shoes to have on this ride. And it's just a problem. If you have big feet, your shoes take up a lot of room on one of these things. So yeah, I could have taken less, but not a whole lot less. I tried not to overpack. All right, next question. Favorite scenery along this journey? Unquestionably, I'd say the greatest stretch of scenery was the coast of Oregon. Okay, just spectacular. On into Northern California, just great. Then the parks in Utah, okay, and the Grand Canyon, of course. Yeah, yeah, all justifiably famous. And then an unexpected highlight to me was I spent so long out on the West Coast. Uh, Even when I was in Colorado, the aspens turned yellow, seemed like they were mostly beyond their peak. And so in my head, I just assumed that the East Coast was also past their peak. And so getting to Ohio and West Virginia when it was not past their peak and the leaves were so pretty, that was an added bonus, and I was delighted to see when I got there. Yeah, it was great to see the East Coast show off after seeing so many things in the West. Okay, here's a good one. What about the seat on the bike, or the saddle, as it's called? Okay, and corollary to that, do I wear padded shorts? Okay, so I'm going to answer this question, but I have to tell you ahead of time, my daughter has forbidden me from talking about saddle sores. Okay, uh, so yes, I do wear bike shorts. They do have the pads in there. They call the chamois, and that does absolutely help for sitting on the bike seat. But if you sit on the bike seat 8 hours a day, you're going to know it. Okay, you're going to know it, and it's difficult to train for sitting on a bike seat 6 or 8 hours a day unless you're training 6 or 8 hours a day. And yeah, who can do that? Okay, so after a week or two, your body will adapt and it will be fine. But since my daughter has forbidden me from talking about specific things that happen, I'm just going to stop right there. Okay. Okay. I thought this was an interesting question. Who did my YouTube videos for me? Well, I had an entire team following along. I had a camera guy and a light guy and a microphone guy and a guy holding a script that I could read from. And no, that's all a lie. Okay, there was nobody else. It was all me. There was no team. It was just me taking pictures all day with my iPhone and filming with my Insta360 camera on the bike every day. And then spending between 4 and 6 hours every night making those YouTube videos that lasted for 5 or 10 minutes. I know it seems crazy, but that's what it took. Did I know how to do that before I went on this trip? Believe it or not, no, I did not. As I drove from Marietta to Seattle, every day I was just grabbing the camera, filming something of no interest, just so that I would have something to work with. And every night I was making practice videos, and only I and my daughter ever saw those videos. I was not filming anything. I was just holding it up and turning the camera on. But I was practicing of like, well, how do you make it transition from one scene to a next? And how do you how do you put the titles in there? How do you get the captions? How do you do all that? How about music? How do you put the music in? And how do you control the light and the volume and all that stuff? I had no idea. So I just practiced, and I think I got pretty good by the end. But the last ones are better than the first ones, but they're all okay. So why does it take so long? Well, all right, so the 360 camera, I really like it. That's what I use on the bicycle. So any of the videos where I'm on the bicycle and it's moving and I'm talking and you're hearing me talk, or I'm going by something and you're looking in front of me and there's movement, or something goes by and I follow that, that's all done with this 360 camera. And it's great. I really like it. Okay, but most people don't know how it works. So it's a little like this. I thought about this as an example for how it works. So imagine you have a friend and you want to take their picture. You want to take 25 pictures of your friend, and you're just going to walk around town and you're going to take their picture. So you want to have them standing in front of that tree over there. So you have them go stand by the tree. But when you get your phone is broken, and or your camera, and the only mode it will operate in is panorama. Okay, and so they're standing right there by the tree, but to take the picture, you have to spin all the way around. Every time you're going to take a picture, you spin all the way around and take a panorama picture of everything. Later on, you're going to go back in and you're going to crop all that other stuff out so that you just have the picture of them at the tree. And then you go somewhere else and you have them in front of the door, but the same thing, you've got to spin around with that camera every time. So that would be annoying, but you could do it, and then at the end of the day, you're just going to have to crop all those pictures to get just what you wanted. Okay, so the 360 camera is like that, but it's like that on purpose every time. And so every time I turn the camera on, it's recording everything in 360 all the way around it. Okay, every single time. And so at the end of the day, again, in my hypothetical, you had 25 pictures and you had to crop every one to find out where your friend is and that. And so, say you're doing that, and then as you're cropping, you realize, wait a minute, I didn't even know it, but there was a cute dog over here, and I could crop it and show that dog instead. And so that one you crop that way. Or look, oh gosh, I didn't see that fancy car over there. I could crop it that way and I can show that fancy car. Well, the 360 camera does that as well. And so every time I turn it on, it's recording all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I have to go in and I have to crop it. Okay. And every single time I turn the camera on all day long, that is what happened. And at the end of the day, I would have to then start with those videos. And I have to look at every single one and look all around and say, why did I turn it on? What was I trying to record at this point? Was it me talking? Okay, then let's look at me talking. Was it that their dog went by, or the beach over here, or whatever? But I decide then, what am I going to crop out to just show the part that I wanted to show? And that takes time, because you were only cropping a photo. Okay, there was no movement in it, but I'm doing video that's 360 like that. So I am deciding what I'm going to crop, and then if it's something moving, are we going to follow it? Or am I going to spin it back around to show me talking and that sort of thing? So the end result is great. I love it, and it's so stable. My bicycle is rocking and rolling, but the picture looks so stable. I really like the technology, but it is time consuming. And on a long bike ride, I've turned that camera on 50 times during the day, and every single time then I have to look at it and try to remember or find, why did you turn it on and what were you trying to show when you did that. So that's how the YouTube would start every night. I'm going through there and I'm picking out those clips. So every time I turn it on, I'm editing it and I'm making a clip and I'm saving that individual clip. That might take me an hour, it might take me 2 hours to go through all of those clips, and then I've got all these pieces. Okay. Once I've done that, then I go into more software and I take all those clips and I start putting them in the order I want to put them in. And I try to find something funny, to do the initial little joke thing, and I've got my little title sequence that I want to put in there. So I get them in the right order. Then I have to decide, well, what about titles and captions? Do I need to put anything in there? And I have to add those in. I put in a transition between each one, so it's not just a jump every time. So it's going to be a blur between the two scenes. Okay, and then the last thing is I pick some music. Okay, and it can't be a song that YouTube's going to say you can't use that song because there's copyright on it. So there's a whole world of music out there that it's not copyrighted, so that it is okay to use it. And so you have to go through that, and I try to find one that sounded, seemed appropriate for whatever that day's ride was. If there was a train, I got one that sounded like a train. If it was something out west, I got some that sounded like there was a Western TV show. So all of that takes time. Then you find that you finally have this video put together in the right order, got the music, you got the titles and all that stuff. Now you got to put it on YouTube. You start uploading it to YouTube, and that takes about a half an hour for that to happen. And then you have to tell YouTube give it a title, and you have to give it a description, and you put hashtags in there if you want those. And it all just takes time. It takes a lot of time. And there were plenty of days where I was exhausted from the ride. I finished the ride, you go in, take a shower, get cleaned up, get some food, come back, and I spent the rest of the night making the YouTube video, and then finally go to bed at pretty late to have to get up to start the same thing the next day. So it was a lot of work. I would have not been nearly as tired if I had not been doing those YouTubes, but I'm really happy that I did. I personally liked them. I wanted something that would be a record of what I had done. Facebook had always been that for me, but if you put videos on Facebook, I tried to explain this during the trip some, they look fine on Facebook, but after a year or two, Facebook, and I'm sure it's a storage thing, they cut the quality of your videos. And so if I look at things I put online 3 years ago, the quality has gone from HD quality to SD, which, if you remember when TVs were switching to HD, if you go back to the old TV, it looks terrible. That's what those old videos will look like on Facebook, and you can't change it, you can't fix it. So long term, I didn't like that to record my trip. So YouTube does not do that, and so those videos are out there. They should look the same, as long as there's YouTube. How long will that be? I don't know, but I did it, and so now I'm out there. I'm a YouTube sensation to a very small number of people. So anyway, that's the story about YouTubes. It was just me learning how to do it. It was pretty fun. I liked it. I enjoyed doing that. Okay, next question. What do I do on a recovery day? Mostly sleep late. Okay, try to rest my legs. Try to keep my legs elevated on those days as much as possible. Catch up on laundry, planning whatever the next few days are going to be like. That's the recovery day. Okay. All right. Next question. What surprised me the most on my trip? I've mentioned this to a few people, and they think I just don't get out enough. I was prepared for, I knew how much it was going to cost to rent the car. I knew how much it was going to cost to stay in the hotels. I knew how much I spent on stuff for the bike. What I was not prepared for was how much it was going to cost to eat out. Okay. It just turns out that for the past few years, my wife and I don't eat out a lot. Okay. We eat out some, but not a lot. And I was not prepared that everywhere I went out to eat, whether it was just for a burger and fries or a steak and a salad, it was going to be $30 to $35 before tips. And I was not prepared for that. That surprised me every time that I could go to, it didn't matter. It didn't matter what it was. Okay. It was going to be $30 to $35, or if I stayed in the room and ordered takeout from Domino's, it was going to be $35 before I finished, and it was just one person eating, and that surprised me. So I don't know that anything surprised me as much as that. So I guess I should just get out more. Okay, here's a good one. What was my favorite state? I'm gonna limit it to this trip. Okay, not the 50 states, because I can't even think about that. But this one is still a tough question. My favorite state. But I would have to say Utah, really. That might be that it was just the first place I went after I rented the car, so that I was no longer having to work so hard every day riding the bike. But the week I spent in Utah, which I would not have been able to do unless I had changed my plan, I was not going to see much of Utah in the original plan. But to be able to go see 4 of what they call the Big 5 national parks in Utah. I only did not see Arches Park, but I saw the other 4 of the Big 5. Every day was just spectacular, and I had no idea how awesome that would be. So I think Utah was probably my favorite state. Uh, okay, here's a good one. I know this one came in from Instagram. And uh, by the way, I didn't do anything on Instagram. I don't know how to do Instagram. My kids were telling me that I needed to be doing it on Instagram. And I said, I don't even know how to do YouTube, and I want to do the YouTube. I don't have, my brain can't handle trying to learn something else, okay, on the trip, Instagram. And so my daughter, if you saw anything on Instagram, it was because my daughter Haley put it on Instagram. And most of the time I would copy it to my Instagram page, which I have, but I'd never put anything on it. And so thank you, Haley. That was a lot of work. And I know it was a lot of work, and I really appreciate that. But a lot of people only followed it on Instagram because of the work that she did, and so I'm really grateful for that. That those people got to see and follow along too. So I appreciate that. Many of her friends that I know, but they only watch things on Instagram. I'm just behind. Okay, but anyway, so this question I know came in through her on Instagram. If I could add another stage to the trip anywhere in the world, where would it be? That's a good one. That's a good one. I'm sure I could think of a million places, okay, but a place that I have never ridden that I would dream about riding, that I would love to have my picture taken there, is a place in Italy, and it's called the Stelvio Pass, okay? Yes, it's a iconic climb of the Alps in Italy. 48 switchbacks to get to the top. Yes, and so having your picture made up there with all those switchbacks that you've climbed up those, I would love to do the Stelvio Pass. I don't know that I ever will, but yeah, that's what comes to mind first, is I would love to do the Stelvio. Would I do it again? Yes, I think I would. Okay. Not right away, but it was awesome. It was awesome. Did I have the right bike? I think so. A pure road bike would have been faster. Okay. Not a lot, but it would have been faster. But with the gravel bike, I never worried about the quality of the roads that I was on, or if it turned into gravel, if the pavement went away, if it got really rough and rocky, it was fine. And so, in fact, some days, I chose to not ride on pavement and ride on gravel. And so I enjoyed that. I knew there'd be some days that would challenge my abilities, because I knew I had some of those days that were not going to be on pavement. And yeah, I liked that. So I think the bike was fine. Okay. This has taken a while. I'm recording over several days. That's why the light keeps changing, I'm sure. But all right, next question. Top 3 favorite sites on the trip. So I thought a lot about this. I think number 1, the redwood trees in California, just awesome. I'd never seen anything like that, and just awe-inspiring, really, to see those redwoods. Number 2, Dead Horse Point State Park in Utah. That state park is one that is often mentioned that it should be a national park. It is so great there. The view from Dead Horse Point was just spectacular. So that's listed as number 2 on my list. And number 3, the Bighorn sheep that just walked up to us practically at the Grand Canyon and had a stare down with Milo, the bark ranger there. That was just maybe, obviously, one of the top moments of the entire trip there, being able to share that with my daughter. That was just great. Just great. All right, here's an interesting question. High temps and low temps on the trip. I think the hottest day that I rode the bicycle and was the day that I had the flat tire. That was one reason I wanted to be out early that morning, and then I ended up not starting until after 1 o'clock, and I know that was into the mid 90s. into California, and there was a record heat wave for September in California, which was just going to continue over the next few days as I crossed the Sacramento Valley, which was a big part of my decision to just skip those days and rent a car and drive to Lake Tahoe. So that was the hottest day I think I rode the bicycle. And the hottest hottest temperatures I saw was when Haley came to visit me in Arizona. I picked her up in Las Vegas. That was hot. But then the day that she flew out of Phoenix, the high temperature in Phoenix that day was 117 degrees. So she flew out early that morning, and not long after that, I got in the car and drove out of Phoenix. I did not want to be anywhere near southern Arizona with them having 117 degree weather. So that was the hot days. The lows, I know the coldest I was on that final ride in Cass, West Virginia. There was no other time where I was freezing and my fingers were frozen that morning, and that was in the mid 30s. So I think that's the coldest day I had. All right, here's an interesting question that came in kind of late, but yeah, what was the best thing I ate? Well, I think that would have to be the waffle cone that I had from the Lighthouse Grill in Trinidad, California. The mashed potato waffle cone filled with gravy and beef brisket and bacon and cheese, and it was delicious. And it was sort of the perfect mid-ride lunch on a long chilly day on the bicycle. That was really good. It looked kind of like, I don't know if that'll be good or not, but it was. I took a chance. I was glad I did. So that was certainly the most unusual thing I ate on the entire trip. So good question. What was the most breathtaking view? That'd be hard to say. But I think what took my breath away was the redwoods in the Redwood National Forest, especially when I got off the bike and went hiking a little bit on the trails there. It was just so quiet and majestic, walking among those giants. That was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. So, okay, another question here. What is next? What is next? I don't have any plans, concrete plans for any big adventures coming up. That doesn't mean I won't have them. I just don't have those plans yet. I spent so much time planning for this one that I just did not look any further ahead than that. My buddy Les and we have been in the past few years doing at least a couple of bike rides every year. I'm sure we'll try to do that again next year. I'm not sure we're going to make it out to Montana again because things out there have changed. But if that works out, we'd love to go back to Montana. We've done that 6 years in a row and love our time out there, love the people out there. So we'll just have to wait and see what's happening next year in Montana. Les and I have talked about going to do the Katy Trail in Missouri. I was going to do that as part of my riding the bike across the country, but then when that changed and I didn't need Missouri on my list, I did not ride the Katy Trail, and that looks like a lot of fun. So we'll see. Something will come up, I'm sure. There's still lots of places that I haven't ridden my bike, but yeah, I haven't really looked ahead as of yet. And then one final question on my list here, and that is, how many cows did I speak to as I made my way across the country? And that's an easy one to answer. All of them. Okay, I spoke to all the cows. So I'm grateful to have anybody to talk to on my lonely days on the bike. And so if an animal comes around, I'm going to speak to it. If it's a squirrel in the road, if it's a deer, if it's a cow, if it's a horse, I will speak to it. And so I speak to all the animals, and I certainly speak to the cows. So that's a good question, and that's the answer. I spoke to every single one of them that I could see. So yeah, that's it. That's all my questions that I have. And so yeah, final thoughts in a moment. So that's going to do it for Dr. Dale's Sea-to-Sea biking adventure. It was fantastic. Okay, I've had a week and a half now to recuperate and recover and think about it, and it's just one of the greatest things I've ever done. And I can't believe how much time I spent planning it, and now it's done. So it takes a while after something like this to get over it. Just not having to get up every day and pack the bike up, not having to just choose between one or two shirts. I walked into my closet when I got home, and it's like, what a pleasure! I've got choices instead of the same four shirts to pick from every day. But yeah, things are calming down. I'm getting used to the routine again. In fact, I've gotten pretty lazy, so I'm going to have to get back at figuring out how to keep myself busy now. So thanks so much for everybody who followed along, whether it was on Facebook or on YouTube or on Instagram or any other way that I know of. You might have followed along. It meant a lot to hear your comments, to see that you liked things that I was posting. And yeah, I don't know that I would do it without being able to share it, because I spend most every day taking pictures and with the idea that I'm going to share them, and thinking about what can I say about something like that, or finding something silly to comment on. So yeah, I really do appreciate everybody who takes part in this with me. So thank you for that. And I will see you next time. I just don't know what it's going to be yet. So once again, thanks for following along. For one last time, from Dr. Dale's Sea-to-Sea biking adventure. So long.